rapid prototyping is?
I have no idea.
Right, but you've done HTML and
I
CSS
have,
stuff
yes.
before?
But it sounds awesome. It sounds like you can make prototypes, iterate, figure out stuff works.
Just get stuff out the door, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I would say that's mostly right. Just getting stuff out the door, kind of leaving out the complexity of building a project, so that we can just kind of really quickly get things, from our head to paper or wireframes and right to the HTML and CSS in some cases, right? So we're going to look at a few different methods for rapid prototyping today. What we're going to start with first, though, is a look at what General Assembly has done for our new site with rapid prototyping. Kind of made up our own method for how we were going to develop this site. This is the current site here, the GA site, led by John Troutman of our front-end team here. And you can notice that it's also quite responsive. As I close down the window there, I get this mobile view, and the navigation falls from the top to the big buttons at the bottom, which is now a best practice for responsive. So it's pretty great. It's slick and intuitive, I think. And would you believe that this site was created without any wireframes, without any design comps in Photoshop? John Troutman just went right into the code. So let's just get right into taking a look at what this looked like. I have some examples here of his early revisions. So I had developed the original General Assembly website, and it's pretty common that, when a company scales, especially like GA did, from 6 people in 1 year to 70 the next, that you're going to need to redo your website, that you're going to need to redo your content. And I think content is the important word here. We wanted to make the site real. And so really what John started with when we were doing this was just in a program called IA Writer, getting down the main content of what it would look like. Sometimes I call this your high school outline, where you're just kind of jotting down like a hierarchy, like this is the logo, this is the mission, these are what the fields are going to look like. But this is really nice because it really does allow you to focus on the content without having to worry too much about design or any of that stuff. One more thing about content. I think that people oftentimes will just start with the design, and they tend to put in like lorem ipsum. Have you done that at all in your work?
Definitely,
right?
Definitely.
And I think the problem with putting in lorem ipsum and all that in projects, it's okay for some projects, but what tends to happen is it's more of like an afterthought, and people will kind of just slide it in at the end. I think one of the main weaknesses on the web right now is good content, and good content isn't easy. It takes time to write it, but it's the main reason that you have a website. It communicates your message, and so sometimes I wonder, why do we leave it to the end? There's a great book out there called Content Strategy. I really believe that if everyone that was in web development read this book, the web in general would be a better place. I think Christina sums it up best here with this quote. So, most web project schedules postpone content development until the 11th hour. As a result, content quality is often seriously compromised. When we practice content strategy, we ensure that our web content is treated as a valuable business asset and not an afterthought. Does that make sense, Jordan?
Definitely.
Cool. Yeah.
This is something that we talk about all the time in terms of, whether it's building landing pages or building whole websites. And it's that, no matter if you're viewing it on your desktop, you're viewing it on a mobile device, there are always certain actions that people want to take on those pages. There's always certain information that they want to find out. There's always certain pathways that are really important. And if the content comes first, then the design will just be a natural, will naturally follow.
I think you really put that well. And your role here is you do mostly strategy at GA, so you would be the one to know about that. Indeed, you're preaching. That's great. Yeah. So we just started an IA Writer. It's a $10 program you can get from the App Store. It's great. What we did from there, we had many different revisions. One of the first revisions, you can see it was just taking that content and then translating it into like the most basic HTML that you could imagine here. It's not much, but it does show what is the most important thing on the site, right? I mean, it does kind of, I get a sense of the content in the environment of the browser. It's also on par with, a mobile first strategy, which just basically makes me focus on the most important elements, right? So I can kind of see now visually, not just on paper, not just on a wireframe, but I can actually see in the browser, oh, okay, this is how this might look in different environments. And you can click through, too, just to some other basic pages. So you can look here. Right? And get an idea. Also, it's nice, this doesn't take much time, It's basically just throwing stuff out on the page, and it's pretty nice. Well, over a lot of meetings and re-strategizing and designing on the side, we went through a bunch of versions, and somewhere around version 7, you start to see it's not quite there, right? It's not quite the site that we have yet, but it's getting there, right? We have a lot more of the responsive features are kind of starting to fall into place. Better image placement and colors start to make their way into this. If I close this up like this here, get the menu down here, I can click into, right? And so we just basically managed that through different revisions. And the site you see now, it was, again, just never in Photoshop. We just totally ran it this way. And so I'm going to go forward today with a few different methods for rapid prototyping. But what I'll say before I even jump into that is that these are just different methods, different styles. And so keep in mind that everything we do today, this is just one way to develop a project. I wouldn't say that this is the best way for every project. I wouldn't say that there's one right way or one wrong way. That'll be up for you to decide, really.
Is rapid prototyping a good way to gather user feedback from your users? And if so, considering, I know we just quickly zip through those different stages of development, at which stage, if you're trying to get immediate feedback, would you, hand over, for example, that first content file that was just basically bare bones HTML?
Right.
Would you want to hand it to your users then and say, does this make logical sense, or when is it appropriate?
Yeah, well, I think users is a good word, but I also think of that as just the target audience.
Right.
And so the target audience for making the GA site at first was really just the stakeholders in the company and the different people on the team. So internally, we tested it first, and that was really, this is fine for that.
Right.
This approach that I just showed you might be too bare bones if you had certain clients, or you're trying to pitch investors, then you might want to go with one of the other methods that I'm showing today.
Gotcha.
That are maybe a little bit more high fidelity, we call. This is fairly low fidelity, meaning that you can see, right? It's just it's not pretty, right? But it's functional and the content is there. I think those are the two main things, that it's functional and the content is there.
Right.
So you get to experience it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing, that people often talk about is, does a feature or, some new aspect of a site or an app or what have you, does it serve a business purpose, or, does it meet our business needs? And then, once you solve that and you say, oh, this is something that meets our business needs, then you can go on to things like optimizing for conversions or, what have you.
Totally.
And those are two very different conversations.
For sure. And that would be part of the lean, the lean startup methodology of, we just kind of want to get stuff out there.
Right.
And why are we even building this thing? And then this kind of gives you, it's not just an idea anymore. It's not just something that you're hiring a developer for $30,000 to start building, but you're like, no, you know what? In a day or two, I can just start showing you something, and then you can get. I think it hits an emotional resonance, in that it's when you're actually using it, it's not. You know what I mean? You're the user, whereas when you're looking at just a wireframe or just an idea on paper, it's a representation of an idea, and so you kind of have to imagine what would that be like if I was using it, whereas this is you're using it.
Right.
So I think you get a better judgment of it.
Yeah. Cool.